just to stay on schedule, we're going to go ahead and jump into the 12 o'clock session, golden rules of building a solid, acceptable use policy for AI. I remember when I was a kid growing up, I wanted to grow up to be someone who got to talk about golden rules of building a solid, acceptable use policy for AI. So I'm really excited, Robert, that I'm getting to live this out, childhood dream. So Robert
Yeah.
Nettles, who is part of our earlier opening for our session. Robert, you've got a fun guest today with us from our Microsoft partner, SureWeb. Um, Baba, I'm told I should try to say your full name. I'm worried about insulting you. You may give it. Should I try it? Should I give it
Baba
an
is
attempt?
fine. Baba
Baba's
is just
fine.
fine. Exactly.
Perfect. Baba, you're joining us from the SureWeb team. Where are you calling in from? Are you in Canada?
Yes, I'm in Ottawa.
You're in Ottawa. Well,
Yeah.
you, I think, win the prize for most travel to be on today's event. So thank you for coming in all the way from Ottawa.
No
Um,
worries.
Robert, I'll leave the communication or conversation to you. Feel free to chime back in if you need something from us, and we'll jump back up and help.
Well, no, James, if it's your lifelong dream to talk about
This
golden
is
rules
it.
for AI, I
This is
mean, we
it.
shouldn't
This is
take
it.
that away from you.
I want to do it so bad. No, Robert, you know this better than I do. They don't want to hear me talk
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah, no, that's funny. I really timely question, Tim, from the last talk with Belinda and Mikey about how do you put that together. The whole genesis for bringing Baba in and kind of talking about this is when I came on board, there were a lot of questions from some of our customers on how do we get, acceptable use policy together? How do we look at the four pillars that Belinda was just talking about and turn them into a policy, turn them into a program, minimize our risk, think through how do we educate our customers. And so I put together, some golden rules for using AI to distribute to your staff, something to think through for how to use it. I also took some policies from NIST. I have a default policy, and then I also wrote it for what that would look like if you customized it for a really progressive company, a really conservative company, because the same template can go so wildly different. And that's where talking with Baba today, and with what you're seeing with where you are, as we're kind of continuing that conversation about what it is to kind of live in this trust but verify age with AI, what it is to have these things that come out where it's so easy to type into ChatGPT and just say, give me a sample policy for a company that is, manufactures valves in and has 400 employees, and it can pop out something that looks really usable, but what is from your eyes, what is this balance that we need to kind of establish with when we're looking at something and with where we are?
Thank you, Robert. So that I think is the first golden rule for any effective AI AUP. You want to balance enablement with protection. Now, if you build an AUP and people circumvent it, then you failed. If you build an AUP and it's super permissive, then you've also failed. I think the art of building a very progressive, a very great AI AUP is somewhere in the middle. And it will differ for every organization based on their risk appetite, the industry they're in, and other factors. And, again, speaking to that, one of the reasons why we must have an AI AUP is because AI is completely different from what we're used to traditionally. Acceptable use policies before we used to use for static technologies, email, internet, browsing, file sharing. AI is different. It can learn, it can generate, it can process data, it can hallucinate. There's so many things that can go wrong from all these processes.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing to think through because it's not something you can really put a box around like
Yep.
one of your on-premise solutions or even earlier cloud solutions that are clearly defined with the scope of what they're delivering. This is really a choose your own adventure type system that could process and handle data. One of the things that I'm really interested in as you're kind of looking at that balance is um, is how we really get to what the company shouldn't be actually doing with these systems.
Hmm.
Um, and I know that gets to kind of the why and the what and the how. Um, I don't. I've dealt with it a couple different ways, but I'll give you a chance to kind of give your preference first, and let's kind of see where this goes.
Thank you, Robert. Uh, so, for a lot of people, for a lot of organizations, and I've seen this out there, the temptation is to go grab a template from the internet, scribble a few things into it, and hey, we have an AI policy, you know. And down the line, you find out that nobody's following it, enforcement is inconsistent, and the organization is more exposed than it was before. So my first, or my second this time, is ask yourself as an organization, why do I want to write this policy? What am I looking to achieve? What are the things that as an organization that is driving us to do this? Are we preventing IP leakage? Are we trying to make sure that AI generated content meets quality requirements? Are you worried about bias in your AI solutions? These are things that, yeah, you want to look at as an organization, and those, I think, are the reasons, one of the biggest drivers as to the question why. Back to you, Robert.
Yeah, and the interesting thing for me is in my previous role working for an international company, it was dealing with um, I was getting the why not a lot
Hmm.
of times. It's we can do this. This can really help us engage with our customers. It frees up a lot of time. And I found myself increasingly over and over in playing the bad guy on this, just saying, well, there's, the EU AI Data Act, there is, this regulation, there are these privacy implications, and really having to hone in on the should we rather than the why not question on a lot of this AUP issues with the AI, which really changes the story. And it kind of sucks to be the bad guy in these situations, but it really helps the business dive in on what is the key solution we're solving,
Hmm.
and we've been solving it with people or technology, and how could this make that experience better rather than it's available, we can, let's just do it. um, and one of the big problems I was having, with having to have those conversations with regulations is just how do you really classify your data? How do you um, kind of organize the information that's going to be fed into these systems, and walk down that path of, having your data register, keeping it up to date, looking at the tools of where it goes, and then with your static systems, that's a pretty easy thing because I know for this vendor, we're feeding them through the API, these data sets, those are tied to these users who live in these regions. I know
Hmm.
what you know, my consumer rights are in these areas, and then you're able to hit that. But as soon as you move into these AI tools that are a little more amorphous, they are going cross platforms, and it's harder to tie it to individual vendors. How do you see this classification issue as it's kind of evolving from a one-to-one to more of a one-to-many?
Yeah, Robert. So this leads again to another very important rule, which I would recommend for organizations that are building out their AI AUP, which is implementing a risk-based classification system for AI tools and use cases. And I'll expatiate further with that. Um, a lot of organizations want us to just tell them, hey, you can use this tool, you cannot use this tool. From what I've seen and from what is happening across organizations, you can't just tell users, hey, you can use this tool, you can't use that tool. You have to explain to them the reason why. And I'll use ChatGPT as an example. If I have an organization, let's say organization X, the question my employees are going to be asking, hey, can I use ChatGPT? But in reality, that is not the right question, or that's not the right question. I think the right question is, what are you using it for? What data is going into it? What are you doing with outputs? How are you integrating that into your workflows? So using ChatGPT to brainstorm, for instance, for marketing slogans with no company data or anonymized company data, I think is very different from using it to draft legal contracts. And those are completely different risk profiles. So I always suggest a classification framework. And I break them down into 4 levels for the tools. We have the enterprise sanctioned. We have vetted for specific use cases. We have used with caution, and we have prohibited. Now, I'll break those down as well. Enterprise sanction tools, obviously a lot of us know about Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365. Those are tools that have gone through your procurement process. The security has been reviewed. Contracts are in place for data processing, and they're supported by IT. There's a lot of broad usage, and you understand the guardrails that are there. Then there's vetted for specific use cases, like I mentioned. For developers, for instance, you might allow them to use GitHub Copilot, but only for developers. It won't be approved for the entire organization. Then there's use with caution, which is really important. And oftentimes, a lot of organizations overlook them when they're writing their AI AUP policies. You haven't really vetted them, but employees want to experiment with them. So again, are you going to allow them? If yes, hey, no proprietary data, no customer information, no PII, outputs must be verified. You cannot use it for final work without human review. So at this tier, you're asking your employees, hey, be innovative, but maintain your guardrails. Then the last tier, obviously, is the prohibited one. Tools with fundamental issues. There's one I know, I'm not going to mention its name, but hey, one of the core things is, hey, where is this from? Maybe from adversarial nations. And maybe they're trying to just use it to gather information. But again, when writing your policy, you need to be clear as to why it is prohibited and not just that it is. I hope that makes sense. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, it's moving away from just having a white and a black list and really giving that gradient on risk, which is what we really should be talking about here in the first place. So, I mean, that's fine and all to have kind of this classification and understanding, why you're doing this as a business and having that documented. But the challenge a lot of these tools provide is the people that are using it. It's not procurement, it's not IT. It's really putting some very powerful tools in the hands of the general end user, especially when even if we're looking at just specific security tooling. systems that can look through security events and really give analysts, data-rich pieces to look through, so you're not sifting through garbage. If we have this classification in place, I mean, how do we have the oversight? What is the mechanism that we really need to think through next on how do we keep people inside those guardrails?
Yeah, so that speaks now to the accountability and governance. That's another very important piece when you're building an AI AUP. You want to establish clear governance structures. You want to establish accountability mechanisms. Now, without governance, your policy is just a piece of paper, actually. You need to document who's accountable for what. And in most cases, from what we're seeing in the industry, from building out AI AUPs for organizations, we'd like to recommend a 3-tier system. The first tier is we recommend that organizations establish an AI governance committee. Now, some organizations might be small, some might be medium, some might be enterprise, and in some organizations, people might be wearing multiple hats. We get that. But the AI Governance Council is key. And this should be at your executive level, should include your CIO, CTO, CISO, your legal team, your general counsel, and your chief privacy officer, if you have one. Then some business leaders, departmental heads should be included as well. And the reason why they should be included is this AI Governance Council or committee is going to be the one determining policy. They're going to review AI deployments, and they're going to build out the governance of AI in the organization. So that is the first key governance structure to introduce accountability into the organization. The second one, again, another very important recommendation, which we're seeing in the industry and we would recommend for anybody building out an AI AUP, will be to open an AI program office, or we call it a center of excellence. Now, at this level, it's a cross-functional team. It's going to include your legal, compliance, security, anybody that will be handling your day-to-day governance. Obviously not the executive at this stage. So people that, hey, somebody is using an unapproved tool, they'll be the ones responsible for, hey, reaching out to the person, hey, you're using something you're not meant to be using. They also manage the day-to-day policy updates as the case may be. And again, they're responsible generally for the day-to-day management of the AI AUP. And then the third group, which is another level beyond them, we call them the AI ambassadors, champions, liaisons, whatever you want to name them. Now, these are people obviously embedded in different business units, but are very keen AI users. So in all organizations, we have those people that you just know that these guys love AI. They're out there doing stuff, above and beyond what the average user is doing. You can go ask them questions, and in most cases, those are the people you want to speak to when the average user has issues. So those are the structures you need to put in place as an organization to implement governance and to introduce accountability.
Yeah, that is that is a helpful way of thinking through the governance with the multi-tiered level. Listening to that and just thinking through what we had just talked about with risk, with having the different classifications of your AI systems, that having that governance committee at the executive level lets the organization kind of set the risk tolerance and provide guidance for the program office where the real innovation and product selection is going to happen. I like the ability to have the guardrails, but push that enablement down, and then even using the champions then to make it happen down at the bottom level. That really would make things work. As we're thinking through this, so we've defined as an organization what are we doing, and we've thought through, okay, that's our purpose, and if this is how we're going to classify applications, and we have this governance process in place with the executives, we've got the program office, we've got the champions embedded. How do we really, what's an appropriate way to make sure that the rest of the end users are educated on this? Is this something we rely just on the champions for word of mouth? Do we have a formal program? Do we force yet another training on our staff? Like, how are you seeing this go on in the wild?
All right, thank you, Robert. Very important. This is the importance of this cannot be overstated. It is key in building out your AI, not only building out your AI AUP policy, but also making sure that it works. We've seen fantastic AI AUP policies fail because organizations did not invest in training and change management. You have to invest in training and change management. Your organization can mandate training, that's fine, but they have to commit resources to making that training excellent. This is not going to be your average, hey, let's do a 30-minute video, everybody clicks through while checking email. No. There has to be substantial investment in building AI literacy across your organization. And again, for organizations, I will always recommend a multi-tiered approach. Foundational training as first. What is AI? What does it do? What are the risks when you use it? What does our organizational policy do at a high level? And then this foundational training needs to be engaging. It needs to use scenarios, examples, and then even engage people that have used approved AI tools so they can speak to, hey, this is what you can do, so that everybody has the foundational grasp of what AI is able to achieve. And then you move to the next level, which is role-specific training. Now, in the Copilot ecosystem, you see there's Copilot for marketing, Copilot for IT, and you'll see trainings here and there. In your organization, you want to follow the same path. So the training you're going to give for your developers that use GitHub Copilot, for instance, is different from what you're going to give to your marketing team that are just going to be selling your products and services. So you need to, again, after the foundational level, you need to do role-specific training. And then the next level is specialized training for high-risk AI use. And then that speaks to, hey, maybe Robert is developing an AI model that's going to be working on or making decisions about people. You need to train them on, hey, what I'm doing, is there any bias implicitly in what I'm going to use to train the model? Am I not hiring people of a certain age, of a certain color, all that kind of stuff? So you have to do another level of specialized training, especially when you're dealing with decisions that involve people. Back to you, Robert.
To your
Yeah,
point, Baba, oh, real quick, we have something from the chat about training people to really kind of become those experts in a ways.
Yeah.
Riley was curious. She says, it's hard to say who is the AI expert as no one has decades of experience in AI. Other than just saying the guy who uses AI the most, how do you suggest classifying experts in a field that is in infancy? I know you briefly kind of touched on some of the trainings. What are some other potential ways we could classify someone as an expert?
Okay, thank you. So in I'll use my organization as an example. We have biweekly co-pilot meetings, right? Where everybody, and we have like, in my organization, we have like 400 co-pilot licenses. Everybody that uses co-pilot are on those meetings. And in those meetings, we get to speak about, hey, how are you using co-pilot? What are you doing with co-pilot? So, and for AI, there are maturity levels. So for instance, I'm I'm beyond the stage of using AI for just, hey, I want to summarize my email. I'm already doing agents. All right. So for instance, you will consider me as an ambassador. And in every team, you will find those type of people that they're doing that. That's what I said. They're going above and beyond. Now, if your organization is not having those kind of calls, then that's a different scenario. You know, I would encourage them to do, even if it's on a departmental level. You will find one, two, three, four people that are doing or working with AI beyond the ordinary. Those become automatically, people gravitate to them, and they will become your AI ambassadors or champions.
yeah, and Baba, I'm reminded of some of the work that I've had to do with looking through regulations and looking through where the organization is willing to accept risk when,
Mhm.
we're trying to decide on AI tooling. Much to what Riley is saying, we don't have people with decades of experience in AI, but
Yeah.
just like with everything else in security, you'll have this new novel vulnerability that'll come up. And there are zero experts in the world on that vulnerability. But there are plenty of people that have dealt with patching, they've dealt with change management, they've dealt with end user acceptance testing. And you still pull the threads for all these different disciplines to
Mhm.
then address this new vulnerability. And what I've dealt with in the past is working with the data scientists that are already on your projects for putting in data lakes and setting up your next generational database systems and doing all of the pseudo anonymization. And what you're talking with them is what tools are they looking at and thinking through, and then pulling from your privacy team, pulling from your legal counsel. What are the regulations that we have? What is coming up? So NIST just released the AI risk acceptancy framework about a year or so ago. And what we really see is a lot of times these risk frameworks will come out, and then 3, 4, 5 years later, there'll be some sort of legislation or regulation to follow it. And
Mhm.
so you keep your eyes on these risk frameworks to then say, here's what the government is looking at and thinking through. Here's what is going on. When you tie this back to privacy, we had GDPR, which came out, and California a couple of years later was looking at how do we address privacy. And they read from the GDPR pretty closely with what they had, and they expanded on a little bit. Brazil did the same thing with their privacy laws. Canada did the same thing with the CCPRA, which I always hated because I dealt with the CPRA in California and the CCPRA in Canada. Um,
Mhm.
but you can look at these different shadows on the ground with where regulation is moving, with where public acceptance is moving, and then make sure that your company is staying within that shadow. So if the risk tolerance is moving to where people don't want to talk to a chatbot or think that what they're saying to a chatbot will then be trained on responses. Um, Try to set up your AI solutions so that they're trained on other material, and you can give that assurance to your customers that you're staying well within what they accept as acceptable beyond just what the law allows you to do. Um, but you know, tying that back in with what we were just talking about with, you know, training and change management, you know, inevitably things will change.
Exactly.
And so you get a tool in place that it addresses your problems of yesterday. And the problems of today are not yet known. That's an adventure we haven't taken. So how do we deal with today and tomorrow, specifically with these acceptable use policies? I mean, we can talk about in the lens of AI, but it's really where the business will be. How do we deal with that improvement as time goes on with change and everything else?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. So adaptation. So for any brilliant AUP, you have to build in continuous review and adaptation mechanisms. It's absolutely critical. But when Copilot launched and where it is today, I always use Copilot. I'm a Microsoft evangelist. So I'm sorry if anybody is on the call and is always hearing me call Copilot. When Copilot came out and where it is today, the evolution has been phenomenal. So if you set up an AI policy and you don't build in those mechanisms to evolve, it's going to be obsolete in a couple of months. Again, the AI landscape is changing faster than any technology landscape we have ever seen before. So those are the things you need. Those are the controls you need to build into your AI AUP. You know, have quarterly reviews, maybe even monthly reviews at the minimum. But hey, monthly might be a stretch, especially for enterprise organizations. But at the minimum, quarterly reviews. You know, policy updates. Are there new tools that are out? Do we need to put them on any of our lists? You know, what do we need to do? You know, and then add version control to your policies so that people know, hey, this is the latest version, or we're using a former version before.